What is the premise and purpose for the U.S. Supreme Court's publication of the Majority Opinion 393.US.503? In this lesson, you will learn to explain the premise and purpose of a Supreme Court opinion by defining the legal disagreement in the case. First, let's review the United States court system. The United States court system is in place to protect our rights as United States citizens. Typically, when a legal problem occurs, we can solve the issue in the district court. However, we don't always agree with the ruling that the district court makes. We might feel that our rights have still been violated. In this case, you can file with the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal may uphold the decision of the district court, or they may make a new ruling based off your appeal. If the problem cannot be solved in any of the lower courts, we can request a writ of certiorari. If granted, the Supreme Court gets involved. We know that when the Supreme Court gets involved, this case is a big deal that will affect the lives of many Americans. A limited number of cases are accepted. When they get involved, they take a close look at the decisions made by the lower courts and decide if something unconstitutional has happened. In any case, the petitioner is the person who files the complaint with the court, and the defendant is the person whom the petitioner filed the complaint against. In between the two, the Supreme Court's role is to weigh the evidence and decide who does the United States Constitution support, the petitioner or the defendant, or how will the United States Constitution be interpreted in a new way because of this case? Finally, our goal is to find the premise and the purpose of the Supreme Court opinion in this lesson. To clarify, we can think of premise and purpose like we think of cause and effect. The premise of a case is similar to a cause because it involves all of the people and events that lead up to a problem. The purpose of a Supreme Court opinion is similar to an effect because the Supreme Court takes a close look at the causes and they decide what will happen next as a result of the problem and the premise. First, we're going to identify the petitioner and the defendant in the text. Second, ask yourself, what is the premise for their disagreement? Third, decide, what is the Supreme Court's purpose in solving the disagreement? Identify the petitioner and the defendant in the text. To do this, you need to look at the title of the Supreme Court opinion, and let's make a note about the petitioner and the defendant. The petitioner is always listed first. In this case, I know that Tinker is the name that represents the group of students and their parents. The defendant is the Des Moines School District. Now that I know who the petitioner and the defendant are, I can ask myself, what is the premise for their disagreement? A great place to look for the causes of the disagreement between the petitioner and the defendant is in the exposition of the text. And returning to this, I see that the petitioner wanted to publicize their objections to the Vietnam War by wearing armbands. To me, this sounds like a protest. They want to protest by wearing armbands to school. The defendant, the Des Moines School District, said that any student who wore an armband would be suspended. Essentially, they banned armbands from school. You might be wondering, this is the premise for the disagreement of a case that made it to the Supreme Court? Isn't this just a dress code violation? Well, it turns out that the petitioner, Tinker, went to the district court and said, school officials should not be able to discipline petitioners, our students, in this way. Essentially, they said school officials should not punish students for protesting. This is a right that they are entitled to by the First Amendment. And the district court did not agree. They actually upheld the constitutionality of the Des Moines School District. It says here that the school authorities' action was reasonable. They felt that the punishment was needed for school safety. School safety was more important than the rights of the students to protest. This caused a big problem, and it's up to us to decide, based on our reading now that we know what caused the disagreement between the petitioner and the defendant, that protesting is more important or school safety is more important. What is the Supreme Court's role and purpose in solving this disagreement? Well, the Supreme Court is going to take a closer look at the decision made by the district court, and their purpose is going to be to weigh the evidence and review the case to decide, was it reasonable for the school authorities to suspend students based on preventing a disturbance of school discipline? I'm going to make the note that the Supreme Court will review the case to decide if it was constitutional for school leaders to punish students for protesting. Returning to our original question, what is the premise and purpose for the U.S. publication of the majority opinion 393.US.503? I have learned that the premise for the publication of 393.US.503 was a disagreement between a group of students and school officials. We took notes that the students believed school officials should not punish students for protesting, while the school officials felt it was necessary for school safety. The purpose for the publication of the court's opinion was to establish an official ruling. Was it within the rights of school officials to end school protests? First, we identified the petitioner and the defendant in the text. Second, we asked ourselves, what is the premise for their disagreement? And third, we decided, what is the Supreme Court's purpose in solving this disagreement? In this lesson, you have learned to explain the premise and purpose of a Supreme Court opinion by defining the legal disagreement in the case.